Hey, it's the Worth Knowing live stream on my very own Substack, Worth Knowing with Matt Robeson, not to mention the Cliff's Edge channel on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn. In other words, all the social media platforms where if Donald Trump had his way, I would be banned. In fact, I suspect you would be banned too. Here's what Trump ally Representative Clay Higgins said recently. He said he would seek immediate bans for life from social media platforms for anyone who belittled the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Quote, I'm also going to go after their business licenses and permitting. Their businesses will be blacklisted aggressively. They should be kicked out from every school and their driver's licenses should be revoked. I'm basically going to cancel with extreme prejudice these evil, sick animals who celebrated Charlie Kirk's assassination. Make no mistake. As Tom Edsall wrote in the New York Times this morning, and as I wrote on the Worth Knowing Substack just a couple of hours ago, the Kirk crackdown is underway. Those comments from Higgins are right in line with Donald Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, saying he was going to use the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security to investigate and prosecute anyone they identified as being part of left-wing groups that they call a terrorist movement. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, fresh off of redefining his agency as the Secretary of War and celebrating lethality and warfighting capability, the only mission of the military, said that his agency is going to spend its time and focus closely tracking any military personnel who celebrated or mocked Mr. Kirk's death. The emerging picture is clear. What began as likely a very real outpouring of outrage and grief at the horrible murder of Charlie Kirk has morphed into a pretext to continue the project that this administration and its allies have had underway from the beginning. An all-out assault, not just on their political opponents, but on anyone they perceive as offering any resistance or standing in their way. Notice that, as I pointed out on the Worth Knowing Substack earlier today, they're using awfully slippery language here, letting themselves be judge, jury, and executioner on who is mocking or belittling or celebrating Mr. Kirk's death. Notice that the retribution that's already starting to fall on people across society is coming for crimes that are pretty ambiguous, like the Washington Post editor Karen Ataya pointing out the fact that Charlie Kirk had said that prominent Black women, all of whom attended Ivy League institutions, by the way, lack brain processing power. She was fired for that by a cowardly owner who coincidentally profits from billions in Amazon government contracts. Last week on Friday, I wrote that with the apprehension of the alleged killer of Kirk, America was entering its most dangerous week in decades. I stand by that. I cited the examples of Robert F. Kennedy and Nelson Mandela, who in the wake of political assassinations directly prevented the spiral of further violence through leadership by pointing out the need for the vast majority of people who abhor violence and division to stand against it. So this is the tipping point. We could go either way right now. And to be clear and to be fair, elected leaders in the Democratic Party have uniformly condemned the killing, and so have major leaders in the Republican Party, like House Speaker Mike Johnson and Republican Majority Leader in the Senate, John Thune. And there have been moments where Donald Trump has offered an appeal to unity and calm, but they've been quickly supplanted by false accusations that there's a coordinated plague of left-wing political violence in America. The opposite is true. And by the way, I have all the receipts for saying that, all the data, all the citations in that article that I posted today on Worth Knowing. So please grab that and share it with anyone who's in any doubt. worthknowing.substack.com. And in that article, I also said that free Americans, not just Democrats, not just independents, but all free Americans need to have an I am Spartacus moment. We need to feel free to say, we condemn murder. We detest the killing of Charlie Kirk, but he also held reprehensible views. We're not afraid to point them out. And yes, while the First Amendment doesn't prevent private employers from firing people for their public statements or private companies from taking people off their platforms, we can't let this administration start a national witch trial of anyone who doesn't agree with Kirk's elevation to sainthood and allow them to bully companies through financial and legal pressure into blacklisting their opponents. Look, I hate starting off on this discussion today. I started the whole Worth Knowing Substack because I didn't want to just write obsessively about Donald Trump. I wanted to focus on things that are interesting from economics and history and psychology and science that can help draw us all back into an active relationship with the news and the world. But we have to start here today. And to do that, I'm happy to have a guest who himself was drawn into the public sphere out of a need to stand up to what a Republican administration was doing. Former U.S. Congressman Paul Hodes is also a former prosecutor. He was the 2008 national co-chairman for then Senator and presidential candidate Barack Obama, the first early state primary member of Congress to endorse Obama. And notably, he's one of my former bosses in Congress. Paul, you see the turn this is taking right now as a former officer of the court, as a prosecutor, and as a former member of Congress. What can we do right now to prevent Trump from continuing down this pathway to a full authoritarian clampdown?
Matt, that's the $64,000 question. I write a Substack, and everybody asks me, why don't you be constructive? Talk about solutions. So I guess job number one is take back the House in the midterms, assuming we can get past the gerrymandering cavalcade that is coming our way. But at least if we take back one of the houses of Congress, that would put some roadblocks in the way of this narcissistic criminal who happens to be the dear leader occupying the White House. And I use the word occupying in its most profound sense. I mean, I've been in the White House under a number of different administrations. I can't imagine what it must be like under Donald Trump. Everything covered with fake gold from Walmart or China. But we are on a dangerous path. We've been on a dangerous path since Trump's election. He learned from 2016. Stephen Miller learned from 2016. The folks who wrote the 2025 project learned from 2016. They spent 4 years incubating their ideas, and now they've fully implemented Project 2025, and they're, I don't know what percentage of the way through all the things they said they were going to do, they're doing. Look, political violence in this country, which has been fomented by Trump and his allies and his sycophants and his collaborators, is despicable. It was despicable from Trump. It's been one of the things that he has done to foster his political career. It's despicable from Trump. It's despicable from anybody. And in the moments following Kirk's shooting, there was all this stuff that the Republicans started posting that it was somebody who was trans because the bullet said TRN. Well, TRN was like the manufacturer having something to do with bullets, nothing to do with trans. They said this was a left-wing plot. You would expect that to happen. Well, left-wing plot, the guy was ultra-conservative. His father was a sheriff. And apparently he went after Kirk because in his demented state, he thought Kirk wasn't conservative enough. Now, it is a problem in the country. It is a sickness. It's a sickness with gun violence. And time after time, whether it's the assassination of Kirk or on the same day, the talking heads cutting away to cover a school shooting in Colorado, all that we offer for gun violence is thoughts and prayers. In a right-thinking world, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, for whom I hold no respect, but whom I value as a fellow traveler on the planet, it shouldn't happen to anybody. This is not the way America should work. We should be able to disagree without being disagreeable or violent. We should all care about what's best for our country, not just a ruthless, cutthroat play for power, as we're seeing now with what used to be the Republican Party, but now is simply the MAGA Party. And in a good world, Charlie Kirk, frankly, would not be celebrated. He would not get the Medal of Freedom. Flags would not be flown at half-staff. People would say, this is a turning point for America, just as just as we mourned and grieved over Melissa Hortman, the legislator who was gunned down and who happened to be a Democrat, we grieve for this, and we're going to do something about it in America. We're going to take a look at our culture. We're going to take a look at our society. We're going to take a look at our laws, and we're going to do something. Now, as it happens, there's no both sidesism here. It's standard authoritarian dictator playbook 101. Find an incident, use it to project on your enemies what you yourself do. And that's what we're seeing here. The Republicans, the MAGA, Trump, they are projecting on the left what they themselves are guilty of, which is fomenting violence and hate speech. And they are going to use it to try to crack down on what they perceive or say are left-wing terror groups. I don't know who they're talking about. I mean, I don't know what they mean. And frankly, they don't care. And they don't know either. It's the rhetoric that counts in their world. And they are deploying the dictator's rhetoric in order to use this as a pretext for a crackdown on something. All I can say is, if any of your listeners are boat owners, don't go out in your boat, because who knows what kind of drones are overhead. I mean, because when they say they're going to crack down, the crackdown could include drones firing missiles at your dinghy.
I want to take this opportunity, as always, to welcome all the people who are being active and very thoughtful and interesting in the chats, and to invite people to throw questions. Paul is an interesting guy to have on the show. He is a former prosecutor. He was originally hired by David Souter, who went on to be a Supreme Court justice, as you know. He is a former member of Congress. He has been invited to Barack Obama's Super Bowl parties because they were good like that. And I'm sure he would be delighted to give you legal, political, or just straight down memory lane analysis of any questions you may have. And I really do encourage you to fire questions at us. You lead the conversation as you see fit, and we will follow along. I want to also point out just two other quick things. One is, yes, Amethyst Peony, one of my favorite commenters. I have to point out that the alleged shooter's father is named Matt Robinson. I am Matt Robeson. I was bequeathed by my father the gift of having a faux ami of a name, a name that looks like Robinson. I've had many people over the decades insist to me that my last name is Robinson. It is not. I've now bequeathed that to my own children. They do resent me for it. My wife did not take my last name, in part because that's her choice, and she has a lovely last name of her own, and she's an outstanding professional who didn't need to change her professional licensing along with changing her name. But I think the real reason is that she didn't want to go through life being called Mrs. Robinson. So I would just like to take this moment to point out to people, I am not Matt Robinson, and I am definitely not that Matt Robinson, who I'm sure is actually going through an extraordinarily difficult time right now.
Cuckoo, Mr. Robinson.
Yes, I am not that guy. But I am the guy who earlier wrote that I think we need to have an I am Spartacus moment. And I think that's what, in another comment, Amethyst Peony was referring to when she said, how are a few million people going to cancel hundreds of millions? I think that's a really good point. That's essentially what I was trying to argue. And so let me just show a little clip here, and then I'm going to ask you a question about it, Paul.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
Paul, if we all did that to the Trump administration, and moreover, if we had been doing that from the beginning, if the law firms that had been getting divided and conquered and lining up sequentially to knuckle under, to make side deals, please stop beating me. It's very Orwellian. Don't do it to me. Do it to them over there. Do it to my rival. Do it to them. If the media companies, if ABC had a scintilla of a backbone and said, no, we're not going to settle your frivolous lawsuit over George Stephanopoulos' very true comments, we're not going to knuckle under to that. We're going to stand up to it. Maybe CBS would have developed a little bit more of a backbone, and maybe we wouldn't have seen a frivolous defamation lawsuit against the New York Times to the tune of $15 billion today. if institution after institution and if person after person had done what Amethyst Peony is suggesting and saying, no, I refuse. I'm going to stand up even for the people who, you know, may be a little bit close to the edge. If we all collectively refuse to knuckle under this way, might we have been in and might we going forward be in a better position? What do you say to that?
Well, if you take a look at the clip from the movie, those folks are not in a happy condition. They're all enslaved or prisoners or whatever. So they stand up even though their situation is dire. So we can't undo the past. We can't say, well, shoulda, woulda, coulda, because believe me, shoulda, woulda, coulda with an illegal administration like the one we're having, and you know, the courts are helping to some extent hold the administration accountable, and ordinary people from all walks of life and all sides of the political spectrum are out in the streets in ways that we haven't seen since the 60s. But frankly, it's not enough. It's got to be stand up, speak out continually. And so the I am Spartacus is, it's on all of us. This is our country. And we're the ones who are going to have to stand up. And as you say, the institutions need to stand up, but people need to stand up. Because look, as a former member of Congress, I can tell you that members of Congress listen to their constituents. They watch what happens on television. Members of Congress are not immune to strong protests, to continual letter writing, to phone calls flooding their offices. The right is on a full court press to towards authoritarianism. And frankly, it's easy to be exhausted. But if we get exhausted, they win. So the answer is everybody in every way, every day, could be inspired to do something, whether it's standing with signs, writing letters, making phone calls, speaking out. We can pressure the media companies. We can pressure the institutions that count. But it's the people.
Can I offer a friendly amendment to that? Because I've been thinking about this, and again, as always, I'd love to invite people in the chats to comment on this, because this is one that I'm really workshopping in my own mind, and I don't have settled to my own satisfaction sufficiently to write about it yet. I'm worried that we're insufficiently focused. As we have another No Kings protest coming up. I think it's a shitty slogan. You know, look, I'm all in favor of, and I've said on this show before that I'm emotionally bolstered by seeing protesters out in the street. I see plenty of them. I live in the People's Republic of Amherst, Massachusetts. Okay. Not to dox myself, but I live in an outpost of North Wokistan and a sea of North Trumpistan. So I'm very familiar with seeing these kinds of protests, and they make me feel better. They honestly do. I like seeing them. I
They're
think
like
there's some
yard
value
signs. They're like
yard signs. This is a long-standing argument. When I was a campaign manager, I hate yard and road signs. I think they're useless. Paul, as a former candidate and member of Congress, loves them, like all members of Congress, because he's susceptible to the congressional mind virus. I'm worried that as much as No Kings is great for kind of stiffening our spines and making us feel a little bit better, and there's value in that. I'm not denigrating that focused. And I would love to see Democratic leaders. We just had Jamie Harrison on the show. Should have asked him about this. I'd love to see a push to try to focus a little bit. I mean, we're beginning to generate some egregious cases. I mentioned Karen Ataya at the top of the show, someone who was fired really without cause, for no reason, for pointing out something that was very true and very full of proof that Charlie Kirk had said that was racist, that was highly objectionable at the very least. And I would love to have us have a focused protest, a focused, you talk about boycott movements. I'd love to see us boycott a specific business and actually show an impact. What do you think about that?
Well, look, it's interesting. I, as you know, since you're so smart, I hesitate to disagree with you. But I think that you're conflating some things. First,
I used to tell Paul, hey, I recommend you vote like this, and he would always butter me up with one of these very nice, like, that's great. I'm not going to do it, Matt, but thanks for the analysis. Go on.
So you're dealing with a very challenging proposition. The proposition is, what can ordinary people do, and what do the protests and displays mean for the voters, versus what should Democratic leaders and the Democratic Party and candidates be focused on. One of your listeners is talking about the fact that MAGA has outmaneuvered Democrats again. Well, I think
it's not just any of our listeners; it is the
Cynthia Rice. I see that.
Who is one of our very favorite commenters.
Look, I mean, but so if the Democratic Party is all about no kings and democracy, we lose. If the Democratic Party is focused on an economic revival that actually works for ordinary people, and figuring out how to message that powerfully with a cohesive, emotionally resonant message, and that we are seen instead of as the party of Wokistan, we are seen instead as the party of solutions, and the party that cares about ordinary people, and the party of effective governance, and the party that can get things done. We have a much better chance in the midterms and beyond of reversing the sad trend that has Democrats bottom feeding in the polls. So let me distinguish between what people can do. Now, your solution is an interesting one because it kind of combines the economic agenda that I've just proposed for Democrats, a solution-oriented, forward-looking agenda, with the mass action of the citizenry, i.e. taking an economic protest to a company.
Well, let's get specific about it. Look, Jim Williams is pointing out here in the chat, as he usually incisively does, Drump Krasnov, love it, tacoed again, this time with sending the National Guard to Chicago. And Jim's point is well taken, that there was sufficient protest and public pressure, essentially putting a spotlight on Trump's long foreshadowed plan. He's probably still going to send in the National Guard to Chicago, to be clear. But now the eye of Sauron has moved to Memphis. And so all I'm suggesting is, I think there are plenty of people who are engaged in the chat right now who, and plenty of people out there who are generally, let's call it, interested, curious about no kings, about protesting. They don't like this. They're unhappy. There's a vast, not so silent majority. But we do need a focus point. And I'd rather have us adopt a MacArthur strategy of saying, we don't need to conquer every fucking island on the way. We need to conquer the strategic strong points. And I agree with Jim. I think that, focusing on something that is clearly an outrage, it's better to have a poster child for these things. And so in a way, I know I'm like huffing hopium here, but in a way, I think there might be an opportunity in this overreach that the Trump administration is projecting right now. They're going to go after everyone, everywhere, all at once. Okay, we're going to start to rack up a ton of injustices, and I'd rather have us focus on one of them at a time and redressing it, and encapsulating it all within a message of, while Trump is going after, he's going after vendettas and political retribution, it's doing nothing for your fucking grocery bills. My grocery bills were just up 6% week on week. I'm not making this up. I've got the receipt. I just paid through the nose. I can't even say out loud how much I just paid for a family of 5 on Saturday at the grocery store. It was obscene. Trump is doing absolutely nothing for that while he's out hunting his political enemies. That feels like a winning frame to me.
I agree. I mean, look, you and I used to do a podcast, and we used to have a Republican of conscience on our panel who kept saying, you people don't get it. You people just don't get it. Look at the price of eggs. Look at what's happening to the price of eggs. And who's talking about that? You're not. He is. He wins.
Right. Precisely. All right. Well, let me shift focus a little bit, because this is interesting from MJ. See, you're being sharper about this than I am. I'm always too squishy. MJ, you're right. I'm going to take the heat from you. Yeah, you'll take the heat. I'll take the heat with you. MJ writes, the protests aren't helping anything or anyone. They're useless. The 3.5% rule only worked before the internet. So a couple of notes on that. First of all, Erica Chenoweth, the scholar who came up with that 3.5% rule. If you're out there, Professor Chenoweth, I know you're out there. I don't think you're listening to this show, but I invite her because she's a Kennedy School professor. I attended the Kennedy School. I'm like, hey, I'm an alum. Come on the live stream, talk to all these people who are citing your 3.5% rule. What she wrote was an academic study showing that one of the guidelines for success, the principles for success, was to have engagement from at least 3.5% of the population. It's a great rule of thumb, but as MJ points out, it might be necessary but not sufficient. It's good to get lots of people riled up, but you've got to get them riled up towards something. And I'll disagree with you, MJ, just very slightly. Again, I've had my backbone stiffened somewhat. I've had my spirits lifted somewhat by seeing so many people out and engaged across the country, but I don't think it's doing anything to bring the heat, per Jim's point, and stop specific actions and really push back. And again, I think our overall strategic mission, as you were pointing out, Paul, is to get the focus back onto the economy, because there's an awful lot. Now, let me ask you for your legal expertise for a second, because under the surface, I don't want to give people whiplash here, but we're going to change topics very slightly. Under the surface, while everyone's been focused appropriately on the Charlie Kirk killing, there was a drama playing out, a legal drama playing out over the weekend, where Lisa Cook, the Fed board governor, who has been unjustly and transparently unjustly accused of mortgage fraud by one of Trump's henchmen, the Secretary of Housing, documents came to light, first reported by Reuters, showing that she had very openly, clearly not committed mortgage fraud. She had very transparently declared what she was seeking a mortgage for, and it was completely legal. This evidence was presented to an appeals court. Paul, I'm putting you on the spot because we didn't prep any of this. We didn't talk about any of this in advance, but I know you avidly follow the news and you are a bit of an expert on this. What Trump's attorneys then averred in court was that he has total latitude, total discretion, and that the fact pattern here doesn't matter, that he can fire anyone from the Fed for cause, I'm air quoting there, and it doesn't matter what the underlying fact pattern is, or the fact that they should have been aware of it because they had access to all these documents. He can merely make a determination as he sees fit and fire her. Now, a federal appeals court disagreed with that, and did not allow the firing to go forward. As of this hour, who knows where this will land with the Supreme Court. Did you follow all of this, and what was your reaction to it? Because this has massive economic implications.
Well, I followed it some, and the answer is that the hypocritical argument that he has complete discretion to do whatever he wants at any time for any reason is at odds with the requirement that there be a termination, quote, for cause, because they started out saying the cause was that she'd committed mortgage fraud. So having found exactly the opposite, that she didn't commit any mortgage fraud, they switched their argument to he can do anything he wants for any reason. The words for cause are not without meaning. And cause requires cause. It requires some malfeasance that a court will find sufficient as cause to allow the termination. So bad on them, good for the appeals court. I'll be really interested to see what tortured logic the Supreme Court ends up using to justify Trump firing Lisa Cook.
Let me push this a little bit further. For people who follow my podcast, we used to do this podcast again. I still put these live streams onto that podcast feed, even though that's essentially all that's going up there. I've moved into the world of live streaming. I enjoy it. I enjoy it because of you guys. I enjoy it because of the interactions with everyone in the chat. But so I still post these in the Beyond Politics podcast. So people who follow that along will get in a day or so an interview that I did this morning with Howard Monroe. He's a West Virginia radio host. And he was asking me about kind of the all hands on deck authoritarian takeover by Trump. And we were talking about the legal front. This is something that I was discussing with the ABC News legal analyst Kim Whaley on this show last week. And I could tell you two stories. Now, as a former congressman and a former prosecutor, I want to ask you, which case is stronger? You ready? I'm making a game out of something that's deadly serious. All right. So let's see. Here is case number one. The legal system is holding the line against Donald Trump. And again, these are numbers that I said, so you'll hear them repeated again. Of the 384 cases filed in federal courts against the Trump administration, 130 have led to orders blocking at least part of Trump's plans, and another 148 cases await a ruling. Now, as you know, Paul, most of the time in the federal court system, the circuit courts or the appeals courts get the final word. And they've been ruling pretty heavily against the administration, 94% of the time at the district court level. In the circuit courts of appeal, 68% of the time against the administration. Pretty strong batting average. Here's the counter argument. Of the 16 cases that have reached the Supreme Court, Trump has won in 15 of them. Paul, is the judicial branch of government holding the line against Trump or not?
The unfortunately case point number two is relevant, and it's salient, and it's really bad news. The way he stacked the Supreme Court is really doing terrible damage to our country. 15 out of 16 says everything you need to know about what the Supreme Court is doing and where it's going. I mean, they ruled that he was immune for committing crimes while president, which means that he can murder people off the coast of Venezuela with drones and with impunity. Remember, he started his political campaign saying, I could shoot somebody in broad daylight on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. Well, he's shooting people in broad daylight on the high seas and getting away with it. So the Supreme Court enabled that. On the one hand, the legal system is slowing down the worst of what the administration is doing. But to the extent that those cases go to the Supreme Court, we are in deep sour kimchi.
That was a wonderfully mealy-mouthed answer. You are a great politician, my friend. I'm
trained to speak out of both sides of my mouth.
Yes,
you know that.
This is exactly. I mean, I having delivered that broadside to my former boss, I'm going to have to throw some credit your way as well. Oh boy, I gotta hand it to you, Paul. You have for years been a broken record on a point that we have got to bring ourselves as a party, as Democrats, back to and sharpen our economic message. You have been consistent on this point. You have been outspoken on this point, and the people clearly agree with you, per the Cynthia Rice, who's pointing out two things MAGA cares about: grocery prices and health insurance increases. And look, the reason in part that I brought up the Lisa Cook story and the kind of the legal story is I think it gets us back to two things. One is the economic framing, the economic story, what's happening to people's prices, what's happening to people's jobs, what a disaster it is, and how, to at least some extent, which is a phrase that I overuse, but whatever, to at least some extent, Republicans and the Trump administration have begun to cynically leverage the killing of Charlie Kirk, not only to prosecute this meritless case against the left, against their political opponents, but also to turn all attention to that, to perceived enemies, to fighting terrorists, and away from the economic disaster that Trump has caused. And you were drawn into politics in the first place because of your outrage at George W. Bush's overreach in doing the same thing, trying to divert our attention onto what he called the global war on terror, and in pretty misguided ways. So I'm not trying to overdo it with a parallel to 20 plus years ago, but I'm going to give you some credit that, as the Cynthia Rice pointed out, I really would like to make it's a 1-2 punch. There's a nexus here that we have to create of, it's not just that Trump is persecuting his political enemies. It's also that he's doing that and not doing a thing about your grocery prices. To me, that's everything.
Look, Republicans get into office claiming that government doesn't work. They get elected and they prove it. Under Republicans, government doesn't work. Democrats are then elected to clean up the mess. If you go into the Wayback Machine, and I'll be really concise, George Bush gave massive tax cuts to rich people, which tanked the national debt. He then made war on, quote, terror, which was all based on a lie. When the housing crisis hit back in 2007, 2008, I actually voted against the bailout. Why? Because I didn't think the bailout did anything for average Americans who had lost their houses. And I said at the time to the Democratic leadership, if you don't do anything to help people in a very clear, very overt, very immediate way who lost their houses, you're going to pay for it politically. And in fact, we've been paying for it politically. We're paying for it politically now. So that the MAGA uses endless diversions. I mean, because they've got plenty to divert from. The inflation is on the rise. Interest rates are high. Trump is trying to fire Lisa Cook because even though interest rates are rising, which ordinarily would cause the Fed to keep interest rates at a moderately high level in order to tamp down inflation, Trump wants them lower, which will really destroy the economy. So he's trying to fire Lisa Cook. But meanwhile, on his right flank or left flank or center flank, he's also engaged in the whole Epstein problem. So he's got lots to divert from. The Charlie Cook attack and murder gives him perfect cover. And they'll use anything as cover to divert from the real issues. Look, Democrats are saying about and we can talk about the pending government shutdown.
Let's go there next.
Let's go there right now. Look,
let's go there right now.
There's a huge problem. We've got a September 30th deadline to see whether or not the government is going to shut down. Will there be some kind of something passed by the Republican-led House and approved by the Senate and signed by the president to keep government functioning? At the moment, as we sit here in Congress, controlled by the Republicans, there are something like 12 appropriations bills sitting in the Appropriations Committee that haven't been passed. So Democrats are having perhaps learned that their base was very unhappy the last time Schumer and caved on a proposed spending bill. It looks like that Democrats are holding their party leaders' feet to the fire about this one. So the rhetoric from both Senate and House is, we're not going to vote for any kind of spending bill unless you undo the damage that was done by this big bad bill to Medicaid, Obamacare subsidies, and other economic issues. The Republicans are saying no, and so we're at the moment in what I call a Mexican standoff.
So I want to acknowledge the fact that in the chat, there's a parallel conversation going on about the boat that the Trump administration just blew up with 3 people aboard. And I'm going to quote Senator Rand Paul, which is not something that I do readily or that I
your
frequently
avatar, your
joy.
Guru, your
Exactly.
guiding,
Me and
your
Rand,
guiding,
we
your
go
guiding light. We're like this, you know.
Yeah, we go bowling every weekend, but extrajudicial killings are not how we do things in America.
Since when?
Yes.
Wait a second. You're talking about then. This is now, baby.
Okay. I'm not going down a rabbit hole here. I just want to acknowledge that this conversation is going on. I do want to stay focused on the shutdown and the spending and the funding. But yes, we are strange bedfellows, no doubt. But I agree with what everyone is saying here. And this is another example of it's the constant dilemma with Trump. He does something that is outrageous, illegal, unconstitutional, wrong, morally repugnant. And do you let that go in order strategically to stay focused on the things that we need to in order to win in the midterms and prevent the total collapse of America? Or do you go after the thing that is so morally and legally repugnant? I don't have an answer, so I'm going to try to achieve a quantum superposition of doing both and neither at the same time and acknowledge that conversation going on while still staying focused on the funding issue. So,
I saw the conversation. So
you're getting sucked in. No, getting sucked in, Paul. You're getting sucked in.
I'm not. Let me ask you.
No, stay away from the light.
I don't know. Let me ask you a question. Here's the question.
All right.
If there's a government shutdown, who wins? Who loses?
Oh, good. I was about to fucking ask you the same question. Thank you, MJ. Yeah. Paul and I go back at this point, 18 years. So, yes, you read my mind, even through my growing armor of gray hair. Okay. Let me make I was going to, oh, fuck you got there before me, which means I have to answer before you. I can't answer a question with a question, which is
I'll answer it.
All right. I have a position. I'm going to take my cue from MJ. I'm not a squish. I'm going to, Chuck Schumer is in a horrible strategic position. Oh man, I'm about to alienate the entire audience. Look.
No, you're
like
not.
You.
No, nobody. Look, I could do.
No. Yeah, let me finish this out. And then
Chuck Schumer is in a very bad position.
All right. You're just saying it that way because you're his distant cousin. So Chuck Schumer is in a remarkably bad position. Yes, Democrats have a tiny bit of leverage in the sense that there is a filibuster, there is a 60 vote margin needed to pass the spending bills. But as always with these funding fights, the question becomes, where will people place the blame? And from that standpoint, Schumer is not in a strong position. Moreover, if we are in a shutdown, we hand Trump the power that he currently has on steroids. My position is, unfortunately, that Schumer has got to thread an incredibly, incredibly difficult strategic eye of the needle here. He has got to somehow win something, not look like he's completely caving in, but he ultimately has. It's like that ambush on Zelensky. He does not hold many of the cards here. If we are in a shutdown, then Trump can essentially determine who is an emergency needed worker,
essential government employee.
He can essentially kind of like tactically determine what areas of the government continue and which do not. So in essence, if we allow a government shutdown to occur, then we do all of the Doge dirty work for Trump and Musk without them having to lift a finger. It's like handing the old line item veto in real time to the entire set of government operations. And we're rolling the dice that Americans will see through all of this and blame Trump, which is not necessarily the case. So
Americans are not going to see through anything. I mean, you're right. Schumer's in a nearly impossible position. As I said, Mexican standoff. The American people hate government. Okay. They hate our government. They hate everybody. They think that when I talk to my now middle-aged children who are radical anarchists, they think that
this is true, by the way. I mean, your kids are amazing. They're great people, but they are. They're radical anarchists.
So anyway, they say there's no difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. Everybody's enthralled to power and money. It's all the same. It doesn't matter. I argue with them about that. But
yeah, they're wrong. From
a political standpoint, I will say without without being disrespectful, the average ordinary American voter doesn't know shit about the budget negotiations or what it means or why. All they know is, oh my God, there they go again, fighting. They can't figure it out. And the government's going to shut down. Who gets hurt? Me. My mail won't be delivered. My Social Security check will be late. A pox on both your houses. So,
all right. Well, so Paul,
wait,
I'm cutting in on you. I'm cutting in on you. No. Host privilege. Paul, you're a former member of Congress. If you could, I mean, there are several thousand people who are either, drinking this in right now or about to on the rebroadcast. If you could explain one key thing to all of those people as a former insider, as a former member of Congress who's been in these negotiations before, what do you want people to know?
What I want people to know is that it's no win, and that's the leverage that the majority party holds over the minority, in this case, the majority of the Republicans. If they can get the Democrats to stand up on their principles and shut down the government, the Republicans then say, see, these guys can't govern. They don't know what to do. They've shut down your government. They've shut down the government that you voted for. You voted for a government that would make all the corrections we made in that big, beautiful bill, and the Democrats
you had it right the first time.
Are shutting bill. And the government and the Democrats are shutting it down. So what is Schumer going to do? The best he can probably hope for is to silently agree to a short-term continuing resolution and say, see, I agreed to a very short-term continuing resolution to try to keep the government going so we could live to fight another day about your health care. Now,
okay, here's my argument. Here's my argument. It's counterintuitive. Right now, Donald Trump is breaking the law. I know. Shock.
Oh,
I can't believe that this is true.
Oy vey, he's breaking the law.
So there is a long history in America of presidents of the United States refusing to spend money that the Congress, which after all is Article 1 of the Constitution and is supposed to be directing the spending of money, that the Congress has directed get spent. Thomas Jefferson did it. Richard Nixon did it. And Richard Nixon made such an obnoxious argument about it that we passed a law back in 1974, the Budget and Impoundment Control Act, which says very explicitly that the president must spend funds as directed by Congress. Right now, as we speak, there's more than $400 billion that Congress has directed the president to spend that he is refusing to, that he's frozen, evaporated, made disappear. He is simply not spending. Now, as a headline, many Americans would say, oh, good, you're not spending funding. This is great. Some of it is, for example, to ship food to foreign countries where people are starving. And some people with cruelty in their hearts might say, oh, good, yeah, let's not spend money on that. But that money goes to American farmers to buy the food that they're growing. He's not spending on upgrades to the electric grid to keep your electricity costs down. He's not spending on job training programs for those of you who are getting fucked by his tariffs and losing your jobs. So to me, I think the first step for Democrats is to try to jujitsu this situation and agree to a CR explicitly to get Trump to spend that money. If he would simply release those funds, I mean, I'm just going to give you a piece of back of the envelope math here based on my training in economics. And I'm sure if Mark Zandi were back on this show, he would find things to quibble with. $400 billion as a percent of our $30 trillion economy, our $30 trillion GDP, is a not insubstantial percentage. And even if it, there's a million caveats, et cetera, there's still a couple of percentage points of GDP and growth that is accounted for right there. Job losses that are accounted for right there. You want to know why our economy is struggling? That's a big part of the smoking gun. So I think the very first thing that Democrats should do, will we get politically appreciated for it? No. But the very first thing we should do is point at the fact that Trump's own voters are getting screwed right now by what he's doing. Make it very specific. Make it about that. The jobs and the income that we're fighting for that Trump has totally evaporated. Thoughts?
Well, you're right, but so what? I mean, you're right, but who's going to listen? Do you really think that Trump voters are going to listen to anything that the Democrats say against their dear leader? I do not. So forget about trying to reach them. Trying to do anything.
I'm not trying to reach the Trump
I know.
voters.
Okay, good. We're not going to reach them.
I'm trying to reach the independents. I'm trying to reach the soft.
I understand.
The soft MAGAs who were Biden Trump voters.
Yeah, the squishy MAGAs who care about the price of eggs. So maybe there are 3 or 4 of them out there who'll follow this and say, gosh, that Chuck Schumer, he really is on our side. I think we want more Democrats. I just don't see it. And that's why I think that whoever among your faithful viewers and listeners said, everybody's screwed, and certainly the Democrats are as screwed. I think the Democrats are more screwed than Republicans, with a CR and without a CR. It's unfortunately these situations end up as no win. I think Democrats in the end are going to cave on a CR. It's probably a continuing resolution that keeps government going. It's probably going to be very short term. Among the Republican side, there are some of the crazies who say, no, we don't want it to go to Thanksgiving. We want it shorter. Some say we want it longer. It's all a bunch of smoke. In the end, I think, I'm afraid to say, if we could fashion an argument to reach the independents, which is we're doing whatever we're doing, voting for it or voting against it, because we care about your grocery bills, your health insurance, your housing, your gas prices. If we could figure out how to make that argument and make it stick, whatever we do as Democrats, against it or for it, that would then be a worthy political play, even if the government shuts down short term, overnight, let's say, and then everybody reaches a compromise. I don't know. I agree with you, Matt. You can't give Trump more levers of power, more legitimacy than to do bad things than he already has. With a government shutdown, he's in more control of the economic levers than we want him to be.
Paul, you're not as young as you used to be. Neither am I. Do we need to get rid of this entire generation of Democratic leaders and get younger ones?
Well, there were folks who were talking to me about running for the United States Senate in my new home state. And I looked at it and I said, well, I'm not sure. And into the breach have strayed some younger people. And in fact, the governor of the great pine state of lobsters, Janet Mills, is 77, and she hasn't yet stepped up to run against Susan Collins. I think that new thinking and new energy is important. I reject ageism. I mean, I'm a pretty active senior. I'm now a senior geezer. I've reached that status. And I think there is something about people who are much more in tune with what's going on with social media and the world of the 21st century. God bless them, everyone, as Charles Dickens would say.
Well, you're a native New Yorker, and you grew up in the district that has been represented for 30 some odd years by Jerry Nadler. He just called it quits, partly because, as you just observed, he's a little bit on the plus side of 70. Did he do the right thing?
I don't know. I ran into Jerry in Fairway when I was visiting my mom not too long ago. We had a lovely discussion in the mustard aisle. He looked okay. He sounded okay, but maybe he's a little tired of doing the battle. I think people who have girded their loins for conflict and who have the patience to be persistent over the long term and who've got new ideas. Look, when I ran for the U.S. Senate in 2010, the worst year ever, and I'm not blaming you, Matt. I mean, you gently tried to dissuade me, but I was naive and young, and I said
you jumped into the race when it was still up against Judd Gregg. You were like not daunted.
But I'll tell you why. I was then, I forget what, I guess I was in my 50s, and I figured there are only two ways to power in the House of Representatives. One, you outlive the bastards, or two, you outraise the bastards. I was from New Hampshire, so it's a tiny state. There's no way I was ever going to outraise the bastards and give them enough money for them to give me power. And number two, having started in my 50s, it meant that I would be in my 90s before I was in any position to have real power in the House. So I said, what the hell? I'll run for the U.S. Senate. Little did I know, I should have known, that it was in the worst year anybody ever could have run for the United States Senate. It's a Democrat. That's one way of saying that many of my colleagues, even then, were younger. They were in their 30s. They were in their early 40s. They had whatever experience they'd had, but they were younger. So fast forward 40 years, from then, and the 20-year-olds are now 60-year-olds. So people in Congress sometimes have tended to stay there for an awful long time. I don't know why. I mean, having to run every 2 years, having to raise money every 2 years, having to, run and govern and do it all at the same time. Frankly, it's not an easy job. It takes a lot of energy. So I'm all for new generations and younger people going into politics.
For what it's worth, I think Bernie Sanders has shown that you don't have to be on the minus side of 80 in order to galvanize younger voters, get across to people.
That's because he talks truth about the billionaires and the millionaires.
Another cousin. I don't really actually give a shit about someone's age. What I do care about is, focus. I mean, people, I've written about this before on Worth Knowing. People were kind of having a cow about Zoran Mamdani and like, is this a sign that democratic socialists are ascendant? No, it has nothing to do with his political philosophy. What it has to do with is the fact that he's a super smart, energetic guy who is great at social media and who's talking about issues that fucking matter to people, like grocery bills and halalflation and the fact that your rent is too damn high. And, I'm going to try opening a set of city-owned and run grocery stores, even though no one in their right mind thinks that it'll actually work. But I'm going to get caught trying on that. And I'm going to make public transit free because, again, no one in their right mind thinks that's actually going to work. But I am going to try a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Like Bill Bradley used to say, I'm going to try everything because I'm focused like a freaking laser beam, like a shark with a freaking laser beam on it, on your prices, your grocery bills, and the fact that life is unlivable under our current cost structure.
Affordability.
And especially, it's unaffordable. That's why people voted for Zoran Mamdani. And so I don't think this is about a particular political ideology. And to my friends on the further left, and look, longtime viewers know, I have many good friends. Some of my best friends are unhinged Bernie people. Bernie's former chief of staff is an old friend of mine. She was on this show. You saw, we're friends. I agree with her about an awful lot of stuff. I don't really care about the distinction of socialist, democratic socialist. What I care about is, do you have a coherent economic plan for America? It's something that I think Democrats have sorely lacked. And is it within the construct of respect for the Constitution, respect for the rule of law, and not being some kind of like minion of this horde of insane right-wing fascist lunatics that have taken over our government? That's all I really care about. And that's it. Thus endeth the lecture. Paul, before we get out of here, go ahead, do it. People may not appreciate this, but Paul was actually a best-selling musician when he was making music for kids. We actually featured in your political ads you playing music for children, something you and your wife did 40 years ago. And then you continued your rock career, and now you have a current incarnation as the frontman for a real life rock band, and you're putting out an album. Go ahead, plug.
So my band is Paul Hodes and the Blue Buddha Band. Since everybody's doing tributes, I'm telling people we're the legendary tribute Blue Buddha Band. We look just like them. We sound just like them. And you can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Paul Hodes and the Blue Buddha Band. Go listen to our song, The Night I Met John Lennon, a true story of a smoke-filled, drug-infused evening with the legendary musician. All true. It happened in 1971.
Let me tell you
something.
something.
I met John Lennon.
I have been a broken record, pun intended, on this point for a long time now since you wrote that song. I think you entirely screwed up by coming out with this new album that you've just come out, which is very good. And I've listened to it and it's great. Much success on it. I wish you had done a rock opera built around that incident and that song.
I'm working on it.
Well, I'm telling you, I always was behind your best ideas.
You're
and
a sweetheart.
This is a $1 billion idea. Okay. Look, I think we'll close out on this. Paul, best of luck on the album. People can find you on your Substack. The W and the H are running together here. You are Paul W. Hodes. You're not Paul Wodes. So people can find you there on Substack. It's like when Jon Stewart had that show. The problem with Jon Stewart, he really should have put a comma after problem. And for me, for my part, I will just say, as always, that I really appreciate everyone's activity in the chat, for letting us know what's on your mind. Sorry that we didn't get to follow up in full detail on all of the angles that you brought up. We will continue to work on doing that. You can, of course, find me on worthknowing.substack.com. And I will leave everyone with this thought. I am serious about this I am Spartacus point. I know I'm also the person who called for a little bit more focus in how we resist this administration. So it's all well and good for me to say, let's all stand up together, and then to say, and let's make sure we focus it on a specific case and cause, but then not to identify that case and cause. But I think it's coming. I think the opportunities from the overreach are coming. And so I would just ask everyone, if you agree with me, to let that thought linger and to be ready to do a little bit of I am Spartacus. If we do not hang together, surely we will all hang separately. And we are at the tipping point. We're going to have the opportunity to all hang together in the days and weeks ahead. So thank you to everyone. Be well. Best to you, Paul. And I will leave everyone with this thought.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus!